The last normal day smelled like ozone and cheap perfume. I remember the sound of the rain hitting the penthouse window, a steady rhythm while the city's power grid flickered and died and came back again. Anna was laughing, counting a stack of cash on the glass coffee table, and the scent of her perfume was the only thing that felt real. The con was perfect, the mark was out 50 grand, and we were about to disappear. Then the building's security override klaxon started screaming. It was a sound I had never heard before, a frantic pulse that was wrong, that felt like the city itself was having a heart attack. My mistake was simple. I used a local bank for the wire transfer instead of routing it through the Caymans like we always did. It was faster, and I got greedy for the celebration. The mark, a real estate brute with more muscle than sense, must have had a friend at the bank. He found us in under an hour. When he kicked the door in, he wasn't alone, and the look in his eyes wasn't just about money. It was rage. Anna was still by the window when he came for her. I went for the gun I kept taped under the table, but the lights went out for good that time, and the whole world was just screams and the rhythmic blare of the klaxons. Outside, the sirens started, not 1 or 2, but 100, a chorus of panic rising from the streets below. When I found her, the money was scattered all over the floor, useless paper in the dark. The cost was learning that attachments are liabilities, and a shortcut is just the quickest way to a grave. Now, the world smells of smoke and rot. I watched the huddle of refugees from the shadows of a burned-out bus depot, their faces lit by a sad little fire. They were thin and scared, trading rumors like currency. One man spoke of shadows in the rust, things that moved in the quiet places between the towns, creatures that were not the usual shambling dead. I dismissed it. Fear makes people see things. I stepped into the light, my hands open, a practiced smile on my face that felt like a mask. I held out 2 smooth, dark river stones, polished until they gleamed. Petrified purifier eggs, I told them. 1 in a canteen of bad water will make it clean overnight. They were desperate enough to believe in any magic except the hard kind. A woman with hollow eyes traded me a half-full can of gasoline for 2 of them. I took the can and walked away without looking back, their false hope weighing nothing in my hands, my own survival, a tangible weight. In the shell of a gas station I called my own for the night, I checked my supplies. The gasoline was a good score, but it was just another day's reprieve. I needed something permanent. I pulled out my only real treasure, a map folded into a perfect square and protected by a plastic sleeve. The paper was worn soft, the route marked in faded ink. It showed the long, dangerous road north to the Citadel of Meridian, a fortified hydroelectric dam that was more legend than fact. The rumors said they had power, food, and a wall against the world. They paid for assets, things that could guarantee a future. That was my El Dorado, the one final con that would buy me a life where I never had to be cold or hungry or scared again. Before leaving the refugee camp, I had detoured to a wreck just off the highway, a military-looking vehicle flipped on its side. Inside was a body in advanced tactical gear, a clean Meridian insignia on the shoulder. I took his datapad. The screen was cracked, but it flickered to life for a moment, showing a fragmented mission log. It read, "Tracking unidentified biological markers, sector-wide priority. Meridian was already out here, hunting for something." They had resources to burn on maybes, which meant they would pay a fortune for a certainty. A gunshot cracked the evening quiet, followed by another. It was from the camp. A scavenger dispute, probably over a can of beans. It was the kind of noise that rang a dinner bell across the dead landscape. I didn't wait. I grabbed my pack, ready to slip away, because sound is death and other people's problems get you killed. Then came the screams, a ragged chorus of terror that meant the bell had been answered. From the grimy window of the station, I saw the horde pour out of the woods, a slow, unstoppable tide of gray rot. The camp dissolved into chaos, tents torn down, bodies pulled under. I was about to turn and run when I saw him. A small boy stood in the middle of it all, not moving, not screaming. He was a stone in a river of death. The Shamblers flowed toward him, then recoiled, stumbling away with a strange, instinctual panic. They gave him a wide berth, a perfect circle of safety in a world that had none. My breath caught in my throat. My understanding of how this world worked, the rigid rules of survival I had lived by for 10 years, simply broke. My first thought was not of the boy's safety, nor the impossibility of what I was seeing. My first thought was of the map in my pocket, the word Meridian, and the fragmented log on the dead scout's datapad. An asset that guarantees a future. I was looking at it. I was looking at the greatest payday in human history. The horde was closing in, swallowing the camp whole. The screams were fading, replaced by the wet, tearing sounds of the feast. Taking the boy was a risk. He was a mouth to feed, a source of noise, a weight to carry. My instincts, honed by a decade of solitary survival, screamed at me to run, to save myself, and forget what I saw. But the image of Meridian's gates opening for me, the vision of a warm room and a full stomach for the rest of my life, was too powerful. The dead scouts' gear proved Meridian was real, that they were powerful, and that they were already looking. I had just found what they were searching for. Greed was a stronger motivator than fear. It always had been. I decided the asset was worth the gamble. The bus depot where many of the refugees had taken shelter groaned under the weight of the dead pressing against its walls. A main support beam splintered with a sound like a thunderclap, and the roof began to sag inward. There was no more time for debate. I moved, running low and fast toward the chaos. The boy, Leo, was still standing there, his face blank, his eyes watching the monsters that refused to touch him. I didn't say a word. I snatched him up, throwing him over my shoulder like a sack of grain. He was light, unresisting, a silent bundle of impossibility. I ignored the grasping hands and snapping teeth of the horde, running for the back of the collapsing structure. I kicked through a wall of rotted drywall and plywood, bursting out into the overgrown wilds behind the camp as the entire building came down behind us in a cloud of dust and final screams. The journey had begun. My mission was clear: get the asset to Meridian and sell him for a new life. The last of the jerky was gone, and the gnawing in my stomach had become a constant companion. We found a grocery store off a B road, its windows boarded and its parking lot a graveyard for rust-pocked cars. A dozen Shamblers were milling around the entrance, their movements slow and predictable, but the building itself felt wrong. There were deep gouges in the sheet metal of the loading bay doors, like something with immense claws had tried to tear its way in. I saw one of the Shamblers lying in the weeds nearby, its torso ripped open with a kind of savage precision I had never seen before. It wasn't a bite mark, it was a butchering. I watched the boy Leo, who was sitting on a concrete curb chewing on a piece of grass. This was it, the first real test of my investment. I walked over and knelt down, keeping my voice low and even. I need you to do something for me, Leo. I need you to walk in there and get us some food. His eyes went wide, fixed on the groaning figures by the door. He shook his head. The quiet ones don't see me, he whispered, like it was a prayer. I know, I said, my own voice sounding hollow. That's why you have to go. I'll be right here. I'll watch you the whole time. He looked at me then, his expression a perfect mix of terror and absolute trust. It was the same look Eva had given me, right before I told her the mark was a sure thing, that our score was safe. The memory hit me like a physical blow, a sharp pain behind my eyes, and for a second I wanted to call it all off. But the hunger was louder than the guilt. I handed him an empty backpack and gave him a gentle push. He walked forward, a small, trembling figure moving toward the dead. They parted for him, turning their vacant eyes away as if he were made of smoke. He disappeared inside, and my heart hammered against my ribs until he came back out, the pack bulging with cans. The miracle was real, a reusable key to unlock the world, but all I felt was the sour taste of my own shame. We followed the highway north for 2 days, until we hit the Green River crossing. The bridge had collapsed in the middle, creating a choke point that was now clogged with a sea of undead, hundreds of them packed shoulder to shoulder. There was no way around. I looked at the horde, then I looked at Leo, and I made a choice. I hated myself for it before I even did it. I told him to walk, to stay just a few feet in front of me. He started to cry, silent tears tracking paths through the dirt on his cheeks, but he did it. We moved through them, a tiny island of life in a river of death. The groaning of the dead was a physical pressure, a constant sound that vibrated through my bones. As we neared the other side, I saw a glint of light high in the cloudless sky. It was a drone, slow and methodical, sweeping the wasteland. It was too high to be a scavenger's toy, which meant it was military, which meant Meridian. They were watching. The thought sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the dead. We made it across and found cover in a patch of woods. Leo curled into a ball and did not speak. He just stared at nothing. I had broken something inside him, and the drone meant that someone else now had a piece of the puzzle. I was so wrapped in my own disgust that I almost missed the Shambler that stumbled out of the trees. The boy had been cleaning my pistol earlier, a task I gave him to keep his hands busy, and I raised it, pulling the trigger. A hollow click was the only sound. It was jammed. I dropped the useless thing and pulled my knife, driving it into the creature's eye socket with a grunt. I spun on Leo, a hot surge of fury rising in my throat, ready to scream at him. But he was just looking at me, his small face crumpled in terror, his whole body trembling with the apology he couldn't speak. The anger just vanished. I saw a scared little kid who had made a mistake, a kid who looked at me like I was the only solid thing in his world. I picked up the pistol without a word and cleared the chamber. That night, huddled by a small, smokeless fire, he finally spoke. "Did you have a family?" The question was so quiet, I almost missed it. I opened my mouth to invent a story, the kind of easy lie that had been my trade for 20 years. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, a piece of the truth slipped out, jagged and raw. I had someone, a partner. Her name was Eva. She trusted me, and I got her killed. I didn't say any more. I didn't need to. He just nodded, as if that explained everything about me, and in the flickering firelight, I felt the last of my grand plan begin to crumble. He wasn't cargo anymore. 2 days later, he collapsed. 1 minute he was walking, the next he was on the ground, his body shaking. His forehead was burning with fever. A wave of panic washed over me, cold and sharp, and it had nothing to do with the value of my asset. This was the fear of a father, a feeling I hadn't known I was capable of. Meridian and its payday seemed a million miles away. I pulled out my worn map, my hands shaking. There was one other place marked on it, a place I had planned to avoid at all costs. A red circle with the name Aris's Folly scrawled next to it. It was a risk. The man was a paranoid recluse who shot on sight, but he was also a former CDC virologist. He was the only chance the boy had. I picked Leo up and started running. The clinic was a small, fortified concrete box surrounded by a chain-link fence. I shouted from the gate for what felt like an hour before a voice crackled over a speaker, telling me to drop my weapons. I did. A man in his 60s with thin white hair and a lab coat opened the door. Dr. Aris Thorne looked me over with suspicious eyes, but when he saw the boy in my arms, his expression changed. He carried Leo inside to a clean, sterile room and started working. He stabilized the fever and took blood, his movements precise and practiced. He was fascinated by Leo's story, by this impossible immunity. He told us we could stay, just for a little while, so he could run some tests. I agreed. For the first time, my goal wasn't to sell the cure, it was just to protect the boy. It felt like a sanctuary, a place to breathe, but I didn't know that Aris's blood samples and our extended stay were turning the clinic into a lighthouse, concentrating a signal that would call down the storm. A day later, Aris burst into the room where I was watching Leo sleep. The doctor's face was white as a sheet, his usual calm shattered. "His blood work," he stammered, holding up a data pad with trembling hands. "It's not immunity, he's a carrier. An asymptomatic carrier for a new strain, something advanced. The pheromones he's producing, they aren't a repellent." He took a shaky breath, his eyes wide with terror. "The Shamblers aren't ignoring him, Silas. They're afraid of him. Those claw marks you saw, the whispers you hear on the radios, it's all real. They know he belongs to something worse." Before I could process what he was saying, the clinic's perimeter alarms went dead. not with a siren, but with a sudden, complete silence. We heard a soft thud from the roof, then another. Aris and I looked at each other. They were here. Two of them dropped into the hallway from a ventilation shaft, moving with a fluid, predatory grace that was utterly alien. They were lean and gray, with long limbs and claws that clicked on the tile floor. They were Stage 2 Stalkers, and they were not a myth. They moved with a chilling coordination, silently flanking and killing the two guards Aris had on duty before they could even raise their weapons. This wasn't a mindless attack. This was a hunt. From the window, I saw headlights approaching fast. A military vehicle with the Meridian emblem on its side skidded to a halt outside the ruined fence. Soldiers poured out, finding the dead guards and the impossibly slaughtered Shamblers. Warden Kale's long-range patrols had finally followed the signal to its source. They were too late for the deal, but right on time for the massacre. The Stalkers breached the door to our room. Aris shoved me towards a maintenance hatch in the floor, his face a mask of grim resolve. He started fiddling with the backup generator, wires sparking in his hands. "They cornered us," I said, my voice failing. "I uploaded all the data to the tablet," he yelled over the sound of the creatures tearing at the door. "He's your responsibility now. Go." He gave me one last look, a look that mirrored the one I saw in the mirror every morning, the look of a man haunted by a fatal mistake. I grabbed Leo and the tablet and scrambled down the ladder just as the generator exploded, taking the whole clinic with it. We escaped into the darkness, the roar of the fire behind us. Aris was gone. The sanctuary was gone. The dream of a comfortable life in Meridian was a smoking crater. All that was left was a terrified boy, a terrible truth on a tablet, and the crushing weight of a promise I had to keep. We found shelter in a storm drain, the air thick with the smell of rust and decay. Leo was asleep, exhausted by the terror. I powered on Aris's tablet. A video file opened, showing the doctor's pale, haggard face. "It's not immunity," he said, his voice strained. "It's a larval stage. A biological signal flare waiting for the right conditions. The Shamblers are just a symptom, a lower life form clearing a path for what's coming to harvest him. He's not the cure, Silas. He's the goddamn herald for a new plague." The video ended. I sat there in the dark, the tablet's light on my face. Every con I ever ran, every person I ever used, it all led to this. I had chased a miracle and found a millstone that could drag the whole world to the bottom of the ocean. Bringing Leo to Meridian, to any city, would be like dropping a match in a gas tanker. I looked at the boy's sleeping face, the complete and utter trust he had placed in me, in the man who had used him and almost gotten him killed. Eva had trusted me too. I had failed her. I would not fail him. My old belief that everyone has a price died there in that concrete tube. There was no price for this. There was only a choice, born from a terrifying, unfamiliar feeling that felt a lot like love. I held the tablet in my hands until the screen went dark, leaving me with my own reflection in the black glass. The face looking back was a stranger, stripped of every angle and calculation I had ever known. Leo shifted in his sleep, his small hand reaching out for something that wasn't there, and I put the device down on the damp concrete. I walked to the mouth of the storm drain and looked out at the broken world. My whole life I had been selling things that weren't real, peddling hope to people who had none left, and now I was holding the one true thing, a secret that could burn everything to the ground. I picked up the tablet again and found a jagged piece of rebar sticking out of the culvert wall. I brought the device down on it once, twice, a third time, until the screen was a spiderweb of cracks and the casing splintered in my hands. I dropped the pieces into the foul water and watched them sink. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out the map to Meridian, its creases soft as old cloth. For years it had been my scripture, the promise of a final score. I took out my lighter, the flames sputtering in the damp air, and touched it to the corner of the paper. It curled and blackened, my ambition turning into a wisp of gray smoke that vanished into the darkness. I remembered a place from before, a story Eva's grandfather used to tell about a hunting cabin in the northern mountains, a place so remote he said the maps had forgotten it was there. It was not a plan, it was just a direction, away from everyone. We moved north, following the spine of the mountains. The Stalkers were behind us. I could feel them, a pressure in the air, a sense of being watched from the high ridges. Kyle's people were out there too, sweeping the wasteland with their technology. We were caught between the hunter and the collector, so I used the skills I had, the only ones I knew. We found a tributary river that flowed from an old chemical plant, its water slick with an oily rainbow sheen that smelled of poison. I carried Leo on my back, and we waded for miles in the cold, caustic current, the chemicals burning my skin, but hopefully erasing our scent from the world. We slept in hollow logs and abandoned cellars, never for more than a few hours. I scavenged alarm clocks from wrecked cars and set them to go off hours after we were gone, creating false echoes of our presence to draw the Shamblers and confuse our pursuers. Leo never complained. He just watched me, his eyes wide and serious, his trust a weight heavier than any score I had ever carried. He was learning my world, the world of misdirection and lies, and I was using it all just to keep him safe. We were almost to the mountain pass when they found us. We had entered a narrow ravine, the rock walls rising 100 feet on either side, a natural choke point on the only clear path north. 2 armored vehicles blocked the exit, their engines idling, and a dozen soldiers in dark green uniforms fanned out, their rifles leveled at us. Warden Kale stepped out of one of the vehicles. She was exactly as the stories described, with short gray hair and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. She held a device in her hand, a sensor of some kind that was pointed at Leo. "We have been tracking the pheromonal vector for weeks, Vance." Her voice was low and calm, with no room for argument. "He is an anomaly of unparalleled strategic value. With you, he is prey. In Meridian, we can study him, contain him. We can learn what he is." She took a step forward, her eyes fixed on me, ignoring the boy completely. "Give him to us. Your original deal is still on the table. A life of security. A place behind the walls. You will never be hungry or afraid again." It was everything I had ever wanted, laid out before me as a simple transaction. The path of least resistance. I looked at her, at the cold certainty in her eyes, the same certainty I used to have when I was closing a deal. Then I looked at Leo, who had moved to stand behind my legs, his small hand gripping the fabric of my pants. I had nothing left to sell. No. Warden Kale's face did not change. She simply gave a slight nod to her soldiers. "Take the asset." The soldiers started to advance, their boots crunching on the loose gravel. This was the moment I had been planning for, the trap I had led them into. The Stalkers had been shadowing us for a day, and I knew they were close, moving along the cliffs above, waiting for an opportunity. I just had to give them one. "Leo, run," I shouted, my voice echoing off the ravine walls. "Run up the pass." He looked at me, his eyes filled with fear, but he did what I said and scrambled away from the soldiers, deeper into the trap. It was the performance of a lifetime. While every soldier's eyes followed the boy, I pulled the alarm clock from my pack, the one I had set for this exact minute, and threw it with all my might. It sailed over their heads and landed on the rocks far behind their vehicles, its cheap digital alarm screaming into the sudden quiet. The sound was a trigger. From the cliffs above, gray shapes detached from the stone. They did not roar, they just fell, descending into the ravine in perfect coordinated silence. They landed among Kale's soldiers before the first shot could be fired. The ravine turned into a slaughterhouse. The Stalkers moved with a brutal surgical precision, their claws tearing through body armor as if it were paper. They were not a horde, they were a pack, and they dismantled Kale's elite force in seconds. Warden Kale stood frozen for a moment, her cold pragmatism shattered by a threat her logic could never have predicted. Her eyes met mine across the carnage, and in them I saw the dawning, horrific understanding. I had not been running from her. I had been using her as bait. A Stalker lunged, its claws extended, and her realization was cut short. In the beautiful, bloody chaos, I grabbed Leo's hand and we scrambled up the pass, leaving the screams and the wreckage behind us. We did not look back. Months later, the snow was thick on the ground, covering the world in a deep and profound silence. We had found the cabin, a small, solid shape tucked away in a grove of ancient pines high in the mountains. We were thin, but we were alive. I was showing Leo how to set a snare, my larger hands guiding his small ones as we bent a young sapling and fixed the loop of wire. He was focused, his brow furrowed in concentration as he worked the knot. When it was set, he looked up at me and gave a small, proud nod. I nodded back. We did not need to speak. The air was cold and clean, and for the first time in a decade I could breathe. Below us, the world could burn, but here, in this small, quiet place, we were safe.